Mark Baggett, who's the owner of In-Depth Defense, has been a senior instructor for the SANS Institute. He is the author of SANS Automating Information Security with Python course, which this year earlier, as soon as it was apparent that I would not be traveling in the month of March, despite the original plans, I basically enrolled in that particular class because it has been on my to-do list for something like 5 years. You know, I have a lot of experience programming, but I really wanted a course in Python. And so that was the one I took, and it was phenomenal. And I really, really and sincerely enjoyed that. So thank you for writing that. And I'm also really looking forward to this talk. You're taking tools that you've released previously and improving them. And this is something that you consistently do for the community. So we all thank you very much. So Mark Baggett.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone, or evening, wherever you are. Am I looking for a control button or something, or am I already clicking? There you go. I think I'm already in control.
You are in control, sir.
All right, awesome. All right, well, I'm going to jump right into it. I do have some new tools that you can add to your threat hunting toolbox that I hope will make you more productive. And I want to talk through some of them. Just a little bit of background on me. I am a SANS senior instructor and the author of 573 Automating Information Security with Python, as Chris said. So thank you for that. And I appreciate your kind words on the course and the introduction. So thank you. Let's talk about some tools. I've got several tools that I'd like to talk about. I'm no longer going forward, guys. Let's see. All right, there we go. Oh, there we go. All right, let's go back some. Okay, all right. I think we're gonna get there. I'm looking for slide 2 if there's anybody who's got a little more control. Good afternoon. Let's make this happen here. All right, one.
Control, Mark.
Space. There we go. All right, so I've got a couple of tools I'm going to introduce you, and both these tools work in the same way. You stand them up as web servers in your internal environment, and then you take your SIEM or whatever log management process that you've got, and then you can enrich the data in those systems by sending off a little request, and these web servers will do some work for you, and then give you back a response. Okay, you can run these on your SIEM product or on a secondary host. First one I'm going to talk about is a tool called APIIFY. And APIIFY actually came about as a response to domain stats. So several years ago, Justin Henderson had sent me an email on Thanksgiving break, as Justin tends to do, and he said, hey, is there a tool that I could just send off a request and get back some domain information about the whois type of information? And I said, well, I can easily write something. So I wrote a tool called Domain Stats. And people liked it. Justin liked it. But it had some problems because, well, if you ran it at scale inside of an enterprise and you didn't put it behind, behind like a Redis server, or some type of caching system to control the systems, eventually this thing just ran out of memory and it would crash. Either that or it would become so slow that it was no longer usable and you had to restart it, and then you lost all the stuff that you had built up in memory. So I really didn't do a very good job in cache management in that first product. So I've discarded that original product and I've rewritten Domain Stats. But when I rewrote Domain Stats, people said, hey, I really kind of liked this old functionality in Domain Stats, so APIIFY was born. APIIFY is really intended to save you one command a day, right? If I can just save you one command a day, then this tool is working. The idea is we all have things that we do when we have an incident or when we're responding to a threat, or when we're doing threat hunting. We have an IP address and we'll do a whois lookup, or we will trace route to that host, or we'll do something to try and understand more about that particular piece of information or that particular piece of data, whether it's an IP address or user agent string or host name or whatever. And what I'd like to do is to just have this tool automatically do that for you at the speed of log, right? Have it run, constantly collecting that information and just adding it to your scene so you don't have to do those commands. And so APIIFY is intended to do just that. And the focus of it is on speed, caching the details, and only running a command once. The cache is completely tunable, so you can control how big it gets, how much data it keeps, how long things stay in the cache, and things like that with a simple configuration file. So here's kind of the idea. So here you see a very simple example. Let's look at what domain stats 1.0 basically did, which was just run a whois query for you. Inside of the APIIFY.yaml file, you'll find a line in there that says base configuration. Here you see it says whois space asterisk web info asterisk. The asterisk web info asterisk is just a placeholder for whatever you end up putting on the URL. So down beneath that, you see a web request that's going to the APIIFY server, and we're asking for google.com. And there we get back the entire response for the whois record. And, you know, this, is it useful? I don't know. I'd rather not have all of that information actually collected in my theme every single time. You can add an additional configuration option. You can say regex or results regex, and you can define a regular expression that says, look, this is the information that is that I'm really interested in from the whois results. So here it's just pulling back the creation date of the domain, which is, as it turns out, what everybody was using domain stats for, was just those creation dates. Is this a brand new domain, or has it been around for a while? So by simply defining a little regex expression, now we get back a JSON response that can be consumed by our SIM, and then, or SIEM, sorry, I see the debate going on, and then add that information to your central logging management system, and then you don't have to run that command, right? Now in this case, I just did whois, but you can put any command you want to in there. So let's say, for example, that I want to just run a trace route, right? I've got my network and I've got these IP addresses that are coming in, and attackers have shared infrastructure quite often, where you got attacker 1, attacker 2, right? And they've got all this all this infrastructure is shared except for the last hop between them. So can I find something like that by using APIIFY? Well, I've got a problem. And that is, if I run a trace route to some host, here a trace route to google.com takes 1 minute and 6 seconds to trace route to the host. So I don't care how fast my caching and things like that are. I'm only gonna have to run that command once, say for a 48-hour period of time, or however long you say to keep things in the cache, right? I'll only have to trace route to Google once, but even so, at the speed of log, it's gonna fall behind at 1 minute and 6 seconds, and it's not gonna be very useful information. I need to make that faster. There's some things we can do with trace route to make it faster. Like the -n says don't resolve the host names, -f says skip the first number of hops on my side, and -q says instead of doing it 3 times like you always do, only do it, well, 1 time in this case. So here you can see with some additional options down there, this same trace route to Google, it took less than half of a second to do it. Now I think that's pretty exceptional. I got a pretty good internet connection here. Probably not better than most of your corporate connections, but it's pretty good. So, but it makes that a doable thing. So I can go back into my APIIFY.yaml. I add some different configuration commands that says trace route, these options, put in that web info where I want the host to be. I'm going to enable some regular expression commands. And then you can see at the bottom, when I hit it, I get back the results of all the hops and the IP addresses that are in there. And so this is useful if you have a scene, but even if you don't have some type of central logging system, you can tell it to take everything that's currently got in its cache and commit it to the drive. And then you can use this tool that it comes with called dump cache to analyze the information in the cache. So I'm going to use that here just to demonstrate how effective this trace route might be by analyzing the caches in there. So I just dumped the cache out of my domain stats. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to download from the SANS Internet Storm Center. Here on the top, you see I download SANS Internet Storm Center's block list. And then I'm going to go through and make a request to APIIFY and just tell it to do a trace route to every single one of the hosts that's in SANS block list. Then I'm going to use dump cache just to look and see, you know, can you see something? Can you identify hosts based upon this shared infrastructure concept? And here at the bottom, you see dump cache is showing you, well, several trace routes, and I'm sorting by the trace route information. And here you can see the IP addresses 93.174.93.0, 80.8270.0, and the other, they have the exact same hops. And I'm guessing that if you just looked at those IP addresses, you just saw those IP addresses in your logs, you would not suspect that they actually had the same infrastructure or all the same hops from that attacker all the way to you, except for that last hop. I'm pretty sure that all of those IP addresses are coming from the same source, right? They all sit behind that first route. That first router they're all behind that same network. All right, so that's APIIFY. The APIIFY configuration comes with sample configurations that could run pings, who is where you just get the creation dates, trace routes, and just get the last hop, or full trace routes, geolocation lookups using online web APIs, and you can also query the SANS Internet Storm Center and for IP-based threat information. All those configurations come with it. All right, so let me talk a little bit about domain stats, which this APIIFY replaced. So when Justin talked to me about domain stats and just pulling back that whois records, one of the things he said is, and he wanted to use it for the born on dates, the creation dates, to really figure out what the baby domains, right? These domains that have just been stood up in the environment were. So when I wrote domain stats, put it out there, it had the caching problems, and I tried solving them. There's several problems that we got with it. One is that, well, the whois servers will block you if you just send them thousands of requests, so you end up proxying all this stuff. So there's several problems that we had with this tool. And as I talked to everybody was just really focused on those domain creation dates. So I asked myself, well, how can I make those creation dates more effective? So the reason that Justin said, hey, you know, I think that there's a lot of value in looking at the creation dates is because you have established domains like Google, YouTube, Reddit. You look at the creation date on all these, they're old, right? They've been around for a long time. It takes a long time for an organization to establish a presence on the internet, to draw in customers. And attackers, well, they tend to buy a domain, stand it up, and use it, right? Especially a lot of these ACH attacks, right? They find a victim who's clicked on their link, and they now have access to their infrastructure. They go out and they buy a fake look-alike domain, and they immediately begin using those things. So you see it in phishing, you see it in everything. So Domain Stats 1.0 would allow you to look up this information and find these hosts, but Domain Stats 2.0 does a much better job of it. With Domain Stats 2.0, it's really focused on how can I make that creation date more useful. And it returns back several pieces of information. It's going to give you back seen by web, seen by you, and seen by the SANS Internet Storm Center. The seen by web is just the age of the domain. Same thing we got from the old one. Seen by you is the very first time you ever saw that domain on your network. And seen by ISC would be a hive mind of everybody that's running domain stats that says, hey, nobody that's running domain stats has ever seen anybody query that particular domain within their network. And then it also has alerts that can be sent by the SANS Internet Storm Center. It also generates its own alerts. It comes with a Zeek deployment script. So if you've got Zeek, it's very easy to integrate this in. You just add that script to your scripts that are running automatically. It'll interface with the with domain stats and add that to your logging information. I also have a Docker file out there, so you can easily deploy this thing as a Docker. Really, the focus on this thing is to make domain stats or make this domain information available to you at the speed at which your logs run, which is a challenge because, well, the whois servers, as I mentioned, they block you if you make lots of requests. So the way that I've solved this is a couple of ways. One is anytime I can prevent you from making a whois query or looking something up on the web, I'm going to do that. So it comes with a database of creation dates that are kept in a local database. Every time you query something, you're going to update your own local database. And so the only time that and we're going to take the most commonly queried domains, the top 1 million or whatever, however many I can put in that database and tolerate you downloading it. I'm going to have you query that stuff locally. So you're only going to make requests to a third party and say, hey, what's the creation date for this? For an uncommon domain, 90% of your traffic, it's just going to come straight out of that database. And then when you do have something on there, the most commonly used domains within your environment, I'm going to keep that in that same optimized cache that APIIFY runs, but it's going to be backed up with a database for longer term access to things. So you're only going to make those slow internet requests anytime you've got some domain that is not queried quite frequently. And then when the SANS Internet Storm Center portion is stood up, even that part is optimized, because you'll send a query to the SANS Internet Storm Center. They will keep in their memory the cached most frequently used domains for all domain stats users, and they'll only go to whois for those brand new domains that aren't being queried, that aren't seen very frequently. So to get this thing running, as I said, you can use the Docker image. If you're going to use the Docker image, it does require an external direct folder where your local database and the configuration files are all those, it has to be mounted as a volume into the Docker. First time you run the Docker, you'll want to run it visibly where you can watch it build, because it does take about 10-15 minutes for it to build the database inside that Docker the very first time. And then after that, you can run it without the interactive mode, and you can just have that Docker running. And once it's running, then just like APIIFY, you make a request to it and you pass the name of the domain. Then you start getting back these requests that say seen by web, seen by ISC, seen by you, and then categories and establish. Now here you can see seen by web for Google, that's the born on date for Google. Seen by Internet Storm Center, it says local, which means we didn't have to go to any third parties. That came directly from the database that was in our system. And seen by you is the very first time that this network ever made a query to google.com. We also have established, which says, the category says it's an established domain, which means that domain has been around for at least 2 years. And here you can see the alerts are blank, but we will see examples of alerts in use coming up soon. So here's a look at making a request to runcode.ninja. Right, so this is the very first time we've ever made a request to runcode.ninja. So notice a couple of things in this output. One is I see the seen by web registration date for the domain. I see that this one was an RDAP query. So it didn't come from my local database, so it had to make a query externally. It used RDAP to do that. I see this is the first time, that's today's date, or when I made this slide, and you can see that in the alerts it says your first contact. So this is the very first time that my domain ever made. You can think of this a bit like zone alarm for your network for domains. And then the second request, you can see that alert that says your first contact is gone away. So I know immediately that this is the only time that I've ever made this request. I also went out to malcode.com and just downloaded a couple of known malicious actors that are distributing malware. And I put those in there, and notice here, a couple of things that make these domains stand out. One is my first contact, first time I've ever visited those domains, and also the category is new. Because these have not been around for a long time, these are recently registered domains, they stand out. So if you have this log, you can go in at the end of the day and just sort by the category, and then go through and look at your new domains, right? If you see a domain that's new to you, or new to the internet, which is what that established would mean, and it's also, excuse me, new to you, it's your first contact, well then that's a domain that you might want to look at. What's more, once the SANS Internet Storm Center portion of this is up, you could see a third alert there, right? It's new to the internet, meaning the category would be new, your first contact, and you may even see an alert there that says first contact or first Internet Storm Center contact, which means that among all the domain stats users, everybody that's running this particular host, you're the only one who has ever looked up this particular domain. So adding a bit of hive mind intelligence as to what's going on in these domains. Now, the tool is ready for use today, but the only thing that's available to you today is the local database and the RDAP queries. SANS Internet Storm Center, we had plans to release that at SANS Fire this last year, but COVID, right? So that has been delayed, and we haven't even started that back up yet. So I'm hoping that maybe that by SANSFire next year we'll have that again. But keep in mind that RDAP has limited support for the extended top-level domains. So some of the international sites and things like that, RDAP, the RDAP protocol itself doesn't support looking those up yet. But hopefully we'll see the SANS Internet Storm Center content be available to you there. And I think then once that's there, I think it's a useful tool today, but I think it'll be even more useful when the SANS Internet Storm Center logging becomes available. So these are the two tools. I am happy to support these tools. If you put them in your environment, you find that something's not working, please do let me know. These are available on my GitHub, github.com/Mark Baggett. If you find any problems with them, please let me know, and I'm happy to fix them. I try and keep these tools up to date and working all the time. But that said, my real passion is to teach you how to write your own tools. Okay, so if you're interested in learning how to develop your own tools, then come check out 573, and we'll teach you how to do that there. Okay, and that is my talk.